Wuthering Waves is a relatively new open-world gacha game developed by Kuro Games that came out May 22nd. It has come under a lot of scrutiny for being a Genshin clone, and the question of which game is better has come up a lot. I want to go over multiple points ranging from gameplay to story to the companies themselves, all to figure out which game really is better. For reference, I have played Genshin since 1.0 and Wuthering Waves since it came out. I will try to be as objective as possible when comparing the two, but I will be coming to a conclusion at the end of the video. I also want to mention that I will try to stick to facts, but I will also be bringing up how I think something feels, which I think is very important because at the end of the day, both are video games which are meant to feel fun. First, I want to start with the elephant in the room, optimization. It's no secret that WoA had a lot of optimization issues, despite how some try to deny it. Personally, I had some stuttering and launcher problems at first, but for the most part I was able to play, at least on PC. I have also played the game on both my phone and my iPad, 9th generation. I haven't had many problems on my phone, but on my iPad, I will usually crash every once in a while. Sometimes it will happen a few minutes in, other times it will take a while. I also have all my settings on low, but my mobile experience hasn't been the greatest. I also personally know someone who had very bad optimization problems, but that was barely able to play on PC. There were also many reports of people having these issues, but some of these reports were false in order to blow the whole optimization issue out of proportion, especially when compared to Genshin. To their credit, Kuro Games has put out many patches in the days since to fix the problems, to the point that I lost count when it reached 20. Still, the mobile issues heavily impacted China because most players there are mobile players. Genshin also encountered optimization issues when it first launched, despite how many people seem to forget this. I didn't have any issues, but I also made my account on the PS4 and Genshin took a long time to load on that. I also had a friend who couldn't even play the entire first patch because he couldn't run it on his PC. Once the issues were fixed, he was able to play. Nowadays, Genshin optimization is pretty good and I am able to run it on my tablet well. When we look at optimization issues, we should pay attention to the company's response and whatever compensation they give. In regards to this, Kuro gave out multiple polls, some for the normal banner, some for the limited banner. They also gave out a free 5-star selector for the permanent banner 5 stars. Genshin hasn't given anything of this scale out, not even close. This puts Kuro above in my eyes because it shows that they are willing to make amends with the player base. Next, I want to talk about the core gameplay of each game. This time, I'll start with Genshin. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Genshin's combat, so I'll just quickly go over it. The combat consists of each character having a series of basic attacks, a charge attack, a plunge attack, a skill, and a burst, all of which changed based on what character you play. You create a team of 4 based on their abilities in order to synergize and deal damage. The main draw, however, is the elemental system. This is comprised of several elements: Pyro, Cryo, Anemo, Electro, Geo, Hydro, and Dendro. Each element reacts to one another differently, except Geo, which leads to a variety of ways to use elements to deal damage. As of now, the easiest and best way to deal damage is with Hyper Bloom. It basically invalidates every other reaction because of how easy it is to build. You only need to build Elemental Mastery, and dumbs down the gameplay loop. The existence of Hyper Bloom has even made some characters meta just because of how strong it is. Essentially, Genshin combat boils down to basic or charge attack spam, with swapping to different characters that buff whatever the main DPS is. The team composition matters when doing this since some reactions get more value than others. There are some teams that don't really rely on elemental reactions to deal damage, but those take much more investment than Hyper Bloom. Overall, Genshin combat isn't that complicated once you understand just a bit of it, especially since guide makers just tell you what team to make anyway. I like the combat because I love to turn my brain off. I press left click over and over again. I love using Farina. She does my DPS for me. I recently tried out a Hyper Bloom team. It's pretty rough, but honestly I like the skill spam. I don't even really have to attack. but I'm okay with the game playing itself. Moving on to Wuthering Waves, it's a doozy. A big doozy. It's actually not that complicated to understand, but the terminology they use overcomplicates things. Basic attack is easy, as well as resonance skill. Forte refers to the gauge above the character's health and is different for every character. Most fill this gauge up through attacks, while others need to use their skill or charge attack. Once filled, heavy attack can be used to proc this gauge, producing a variety of attacks. Resonance Liberation is the character's ultimate. You gain energy for this by defeating and hitting enemies. Intro and outro skills are still simple to understand. There is a small circle to the left of the character's HP that fills up with something called Concerto Energy, which you can get from weapons, attacks, and skills. When full, the character can be swapped out and their outro skill is used. This skill can range from boosting the damage of the next character, to healing them, to straight out damage. The intro skill of the swap character is used at the same time, and it usually just deals damage. It also does quite a bit of vibration strength damage. When the bar is broken, enemies will enter a vulnerable state where you can safely deal damage to them. It also makes a very satisfying sound. On top of what each character does, combat also consists of dodging and parrying. Pressing the sprint button near an incoming attack will produce a dodge, negating damage and allowing you to counterattack the enemy, which will do vibration strength damage. You can string together dodges to escape boss combos and allow yourself an opportunity to strike back. This is so important to combat that you can defeat enemies of much higher level than you as long as you don't get hit. Parrying happens when you attack an enemy with a weakness halo with a basic, heavy, skill, ultimate, or an intro skill. This does quite a bit of damage to the enemy's bar and also stops the enemy's attack. On top of being very flashy, it is also very quick to break enemies, letting you deal damage very quickly. Wuwa also has different elements that each character can have: Arrow, Electro, Fusion, Spectral, Glacio, and Havoc. These elements don't have any reactions with one another, but enemies can have resistances to different elements. Sorry, not sorry, Wuwa combat is just miles better. I don't think anyone is arguing against this. It is more fluid, fun, and interactive. It reminds me a lot of Devil May Cry combat, one of the best combat systems in any game I have ever played. Sometimes I go out of my way to fight enemies just because I love the combat so much. The combat feels like more than just a DPS check. It feels more like a skill check where you have to learn the boss patterns and attacks. Sometimes I'll kill a boss in less than 30 seconds, while other times I will just mess up so hard that I can't believe that I even got to my level in the first place. Nothing feels better than getting that Dark Souls feel of getting beat down again and again until you finally overcome the challenge. Or you could just out-level it. You know, that's also an option. To each their own, I guess. Wuthering Waves definitely has its combat nailed down, and it's getting to be well known for it. On top of how the core gameplay feels, we need to talk about enemies. People may get angry at me for saying this, but Genshin enemies are pushovers. Most normal enemies are either nothing or just annoying to fight, sometimes both. Elites are also nothing, with quite a few being susceptible to elemental reactions to defeat them. The thing is, most of the time you can just ignore it and brute force them with pure damage. Some also have mechanics to put them in a vulnerable state, but I honestly don't pay attention to them because you can just bonk them to death. Wuwa normal enemies are also pushovers, but at least they're not annoying, at least for me. Elites are much more fun to fight, especially since they have their own vibration bar that you can break in order to make them vulnerable. Most elites aren't that hard to fight, but that doesn't mean that they aren't fun to fight. Design wise, I can't really say much since I actually think both games have pretty good enemy design. They both look pretty unique and interesting. Look. Coming up next is bosses. No way to sugarcoat it, Wuwa is better. While Genshin bosses have gotten better, there are quite a few bosses that are pretty boring to fight. Wuwa bosses each feel unique and satisfying to fight. At higher levels, bosses can get new moves and mechanics that add to their difficulty. Not to mention the showmanship some of them have, or how interesting they are. Are you really going to tell me that any of the Regisvine or Cube bosses even come close to this? The only boss I'll give you is the turtle. Easy to kill, but holy, it's an annoying boss. Let me just wait for my kid to go to college before it's ready to fight, and then proceed to get thrown away by its large AoE slams, only to wail on the turtle until it dies. I have a sinking suspicion that perhaps the turtle boss fight was inspired by another game's boss design, but what game could it be? This one is going to be controversial. I'm fairly certain most people would say that Genshin's character design is the best in the gacha space. Hot take, HSR is better, while saying that Wuwa character design is bland. I disagree since I feel that it's just a different art styles clashing. Genshin has a bigger cartoony, or perhaps anime look, as shown with how it designs its female characters. I won't lie, they look great, and a lot of people agree, but it ends at females. Genshin has done men dirty, with Ito and Alhaitham looking more like K-pop stars than buff dudes. Even one of the most hyped up characters, Dainsleif, looks like an off-brand Dimitri from Fire Emblem Three Houses. Dimitri at home. Dimitri came first, by the way. Wuwa has a more muted color palette in its character design, with a lot of characters having black, blue, gray, and white in their designs. This leads to fewer characters popping out as much when compared to one another. However, this all fits the world that Wuwa is trying to create. It's supposed to be a post-apocalyptic world. I wouldn't expect a lot of characters to have flashy colors that would expose them. In terms of male characters, they are outstanding. I mean, just look at Gion and Kalcharo. They actually look like soldiers, not boys dressing up and playing pretend. Even the female characters look great. And, hot take, I think that they may be better than most of Genshin's. I mean, it's not like Yin Lin single-handedly put Wuwa above Genshin in Japan or anything. Does Genshin have great character design? No duh. Is it the end-all be-all? Nuh-uh. Character design is hard to talk about because it's subjective for the most part, and both games have messed up on some parts. God, I hate Varian's design. But if you like Genshin's characters more than Wuwa's, more power to you. I'll just ignore your opinion. That was a joke in case you were ready to make a Twitter post saying how much trauma I gave you. When it comes to exploration, I think that Wuthering Waves is the clear winner. There may not be as much to explore right now as compared to Genshin, but how you traverse the world is so much more satisfying in Wuwa. This is especially important for an open world game since so much of the time that players will spend is traveling around that open world. Sprinting only takes stamina when you first dash, allowing you to sprint indefinitely. This is only out of combat though. You can sprint up walls and parkour over ledges, making it really satisfying to just climb surfaces. I don't have to worry about running out of stamina halfway up a mountain and falling all the way down. Hell, even when you glide it feels better. If you put away your glider in the air, you can still move around a bit on your way down, instead of just falling like a rock. Wuwa also lets you use Inferno Rider for a limited amount of time. It takes the full cooldown though. This at least shows us that rideable echoes could come in the future, since Wuwa is still in 1.0. Genshin allows you to traverse faster with some characters like Yelan or Lynette for sprinting, but they can get stuck on some ledges. Other characters like Cloud Retainer, Kazuha, and Wanderer have vertical mobility. Faster traversal being tied to characters kinda sucks. Even if Lynette is free, I may not want to use her in my team for various reasons. The point is, Wuwa just makes traveling fun. Hell, sometimes I just run up walls just cause I can. And I don't have any proof, but I feel like I climb faster with a taller character. Don't quote me though, it's just a theory. A traveling theory. Genshin Impact has recently made their stamina cap go from 160 to 200. This just makes it so that you have more time before your stamina caps, which doesn't really change much if you were already making sure your stamina didn't cap. Still, it is a good quality of life change and it feels much nicer than before. Wuthering Waves has a 240 stamina cap with the system coming that will save over capped stamina for later. This will allow players to not completely lose out on stamina once it caps. Most of Genshin's stamina uses is 20 to 40 stamina, with a condensed resin system that allows you to convert 40 stamina into an item that can be used later to increase rewards. A majority of the stamina though will be used for farming artifacts, unless you're building a character. Artifacts can be a gigantic pain to grind, since what you get is random as well as the main and substats. There's no way to guarantee what piece you get, although some sets will let you strongbox. a mechanic where if you place 3 5-star artifacts in the alchemy table, you are guaranteed an artifact from a certain set of your choosing. The main stat and substats are still random, however. Wuwa has a higher stamina cost, 40 for its domains and 60 for its boss drops and tacit fields. Boss drops can vary between 2 to 3 at SLQ 5, with you needing 9 to ascend a character. This means that to get from 0 to 9, you need 3 to 4 runs or 180 to 240 stamina. Tacit fields can give out echoes from 2 possible sets, as well as echo XP and tuners. This is important because echoes need a lot of XP to be maxed out and 10 tuners to roll a substat. This is the main way casuals will be getting their echoes and level up mats, and at SLQ3 it takes about 2 days worth of stamina to get enough echo XP materials to fully level an echo to 25. Adding on to this, we need to talk about Wuwa's ecosystem. When you defeat an enemy, there's a chance for it to drop us an echo, an equipable artifact that makes your character stronger. Each echo has a cost, being 4, 3, or 1, and depending on the cost, your main stat changes. 1 cost can only have HP, defense, or attack, while 4 costs are the only ones who can have crit rate and crit damage as their main stat. 3 costs have the greatest amount of variance in their main stat and are the only ones who can get an element damage bonus, allowing for greater damage. The optimal main stat for most characters, especially main DPS characters, is 1 crit rate / crit damage, 2 elemental damage bonus, and 2 attack percents. This is also known as 4, 3, 3, 1, 1. There's also 4, 4, 1, 1, 1, but I won't go into that right now. Each day enemies will respawn, letting you farm every day if you wish to. There are a lot of 1 costs, and if you want one from a particular set, you can filter it out in the data bank. 4 costs are bosses and respawn infinitely. All you have to do is wait 2 minutes. 3 costs is where things get rough. Remember when I said that 3 costs have the highest variance? This makes getting an on-set damage bonus main stat really hard, especially when you consider the fact that once you get the right main stat, you still have to roll for substats. If you don't get any crit rate or crit damage rolls, you're pretty much cooked. You don't get much from tacit fields, and it can be rough if you get unlucky. Luckily, there's a few ways to make farming easier. There is a hidden echo pity system that guarantees you an echo drop. If you don't get an echo after killing 3 echoes, you are guaranteed one for the 4th one you kill. This is shown by the aura they have. You can use this knowledge to farm 3 costs, since pity is split between the different costs. One last tip I have for echoes is to only level them for 5 levels and then see what type of substat they roll. I would go in to +10 for most pieces, but you can keep to +5 if you want. If the first 2 substats aren't something you want, then dump the piece. Even if it's a damage bonus, you shouldn't level it anymore. You can use it in the meantime, but I wouldn't recommend you keep rolling on it. Hot take. I actually like Genshin events. They're pretty easy, and as long as I skip any dialogue that's boring, it's pretty enjoyable. I did in fact like Ito's beetle fight. I did in fact think the alchemy event was good. Okay, it wasn't that good, but I feel like I could do it quickly. The recent concert event was actually pretty goated though, especially since I like rhythm games myself, and Ito's singing was a pleasant surprise. Bigger hot take. Genshin's really early events don't really matter, since its events have evolved to be better. The newest event, Mutual Security Enhancing Simulation, was okay. Easy and simple, not much to say. I beat it in an hour. Wuthering Waves also had some events for us to get into. Overdash was actually kinda fun. Easy, but running and jumping in this game is fun anyway. Halo Smelt was very fun, allowing me to use characters that I haven't built yet, and giving me a place to use the ones I have. The 2 new events, Wuthering Exploration and Second Coming of Solaris, both were easy to complete, but other than that, they don't have much to talk about. Endgame, the thing that Genshin players have been asking for years. I wonder why they would want it. It's just gonna stress them out, and Genshin wouldn't want that. Well, looks like we are getting more Endgame in 4.7. Oh wait, it's being rotated out with the Abyss. That's fine, at least I get 800 primos. Oh wait, I can only use limited characters? That's fine, they let me use trial characters. It'll be fine. Surely. In all seriousness, it's great that Genshin is adding more endgame. I just hope that there's actually a reason to do it. And no Abyss barely counts. Especially when me not getting full stars is only like 50 or 100 primos. I won't lie, I haven't done a lot of Abyss, it just never appealed to me. but once I started doing it, I just felt like it was a DPS check. It's all about killing things with enough DPS quickly, not how you interact with enemy abilities. Besides the obvious don't put Hydro elements against the Hydro enemies. Genshin doesn't have a lot of endgame. Even with Theater coming, it only has 2, and they will be rotating, so you'll still only have one endgame thing to do. WoWa has more endgame at 1.0 than Genshin has at 4.7. It's just a fact. Not only does it have its own abyss, you need 3 teams to fully clear it. This means that you have a reason to build more than 6 characters, not to mention the fact that there's 4 levels for you to clear. It also is more flexible because it operates on a stamina system, with each level taking a bit of stamina from each character upon completion. This means that if you want to put one team for the first level and another for the second, you can. There's also the Illusionary Realm, where you get upgrades called Metaphors after completing a stage. There's trial characters that you can use to beat up to difficulty 4, and rewards to acquire using currency you get for completing a run. These rewards are actually very useful, with 2 of them being a way for you to get echoes with the damage main stat for the set you choose. WoWa also has hologram bosses, with each boss getting stronger and gaining new moves the higher difficulty chosen. They also offer currency that you can use to redeem items. When you challenge these bosses, food buffs will stay, and your health will be refilled. This allows you to try as many times as you want, letting you practice until you win. It wouldn't surprise me if WoWa put in more endgame later on, or expands what it currently has. Multiplayer in Genshin boils down to showing off your characters and taking the mats of someone else's world. Not much to say here. There's not much point in using multiplayer. Maybe if you're having trouble doing some stages and need help, then you can match, but considering that there used to be a bug where players could delete items like domains from a character's world using Kave, yeah no, I'll keep to myself. At least in WoWa, there's more incentive to do multiplayer, especially since echoes can be farmed together. The world will have the host databank though, so be mindful of that. You could also do red mist enemies together if you wish. They drop echoes upon defeat, with higher level ones dropping a 5-star echo. Multiplayer in either game boils down to farming though, and it requires having friends, something most Scotch players don't have. The big thing that many people say they still play Genshin for, and the thing that Kuro Games rewrote 90% of in Wuthering Waves. I'ma keep it a buck. Genshin's story gets glazed hard, but outside of 4.0 and 4.2, or any part that includes Freyna for that matter, it's mid. I said it. It's mid. Mondstadt is boring, and Lue was interesting until Tartaglia starts talking almost as much as Paimon. Oh, and we can't forget Paimon, the single biggest reason I personally can't enjoy even listening to the story. I went from liking the emergency food to thinking that I'd rather just starve. Inazuma was a mess, and when it did start to get hype, I was already clocked out. I was in a coma during Sumeru, so I don't remember much, so I won't say much other than it never caught my attention and I will not be revisiting that godforsaken nation. Fontaine is where that story actually got good, for a patch. Then we went to the prison and things went downhill. The end of Fontaine was great though, really enjoyed it. Now comes the newest Dainsleif quest. I do not remember when we got the last one, so I forgot everything they talked about. And this quest really felt like it was to tie up loose ends rather than to set anything big up, except for like one big thing, but that's all. So overall, Genshin feels more lore heavy in its storytelling, which makes understanding and experiencing the story rough. I'd rather just look up lore vids from other CCs than try to understand everything the game is trying to tell me personally. WoWa's story gets a lot of flack, and for good reason. The first 3 acts drag out, with a lot of new terminology being thrown at you. People say that the story picks up when you meet Scar, which it does, for some. For weirdos like me, meeting Scar in Act 3 actually made me like the character less. His story was interesting, but man, he loves to talk. I hated being told the story like I was a 3rd grader. No matter how interesting his story is, how the game told it made me lose interest. Act 4 was a joke, with the best payoff being the end, where you fight Scar. It's a really cool fight. Act 5 is slow to pick up, but I really liked it. Mainly because Encore, Alto, and Camellia actually kept me engaged. Act 6 is where people say the story really got good, but, and I'm sure I'm gonna get hate, I didn't like it. Defending the city was cool, doing the army stuff was cool, and the boss fight was great. But man, did it drag on for so long. It just felt that any tension the game tried to create would go away simply because of how long some scenes would take. Which brings me to the skip button. I could use it, but I mean if I skipped everything then I wouldn't know the story. I, like many others, want to see Wuthering Waves' story. The skip button is only for side quests. I'm going to end it here by saying that I do think that both games have potential to improve their story in the future, but let's not pretend that there aren't any glaring issues that they have. Since we talked about story, we must talk about localization. There's no way to sugarcoat it. The English localization in Wuwa is rough. Most people cite Yang Yang's voice for this, but it's not just the voice work. The game has quite a few problems, from text going off screen to just being out of order.
Remember to check your terminal signals and wear the Academy's protective suit correctly. And don't forget to stay hydrated. Now, I have experiments to run. Take care. The Academy has noted a concerning rise in tacit field activities. Please use caution when exiting the city.
In terms of voice work, apparently the VAs didn't have much direction given to them, which explains how deadpan some of the lines delivered were.
You're not going anywhere.
There's always the option of changing the voices to a different language. I heard that the JP voice work was amazing, but the solution to bad voice work shouldn't be changing the language. I, for one, will not be changing to a different language. I will sit through every voiced word no matter how much it may make me want to quit. Honestly though, after going through the story twice, don't ask why, I've started to be alright with Yang Yang's and Chixia's voices. No, this isn't Stockholm Syndrome. I don't mind the English voice work much anymore, but I get if others don't. Genshin has fixed any localization issues they had, at least in English. There might have been some problems here and there for text, but I can't think of any big problems that it has had recently. The biggest problems it has is if a word is said differently than it is shown. At the end of the day, these are gacha games. They are meant to be predatory and get people to spend a lot of money. The monetization of both games is similar. You can get a $5 monthly pass that gives you 90 premium currency a day for 30 days and 300 straight out. The top-up bonus promotes first-time buying. The $100 one only gives you 40 pulls. This is without the first-time top-up bonus. There's also bundles that you can buy in the shop for the currency you buy, but most just aren't worth it. Going into the gacha system, however, we see a big difference. Genshin Impact has a 90 pull pity system. This means that no matter what, at 90 pulls you will get a 5-star, with the 50% chance of the character being the limited time banner one. If you lose the 50-50, you are guaranteed the limited time character the next time you get a 5-star, and pity carries over from limited banner to limited banner. The weapon banner has 2 5-star weapons put together, with you having a 33% chance to get what you want guaranteed at 80 pulls. If you don't get it, you get a point in the point system. The next time you pull a 5-star, it's going to be one of the time limited weapons, and after 2 points you get to guarantee that the next weapon you pull is the one you want. The weapon banner is really bad, and it can cost up to 240 pulls to get the weapon you want. Fate points on the banner also don't carry over. This used to be worse because the weapon didn't have a fate point system. You could lose 15 times in a row and not get a single copy of the weapon you wanted. There is also soft pity, which means that at pull 75 for characters and 65 for weapons, your chances of getting a 5-star dramatically go up per pull. This means that most people end up getting a 5-star between 75 to 89 pulls. Wuthering Waves character and weapon banners are guaranteed at 80 pity. Character banners still have a 50-50 chance, but weapon banners are guaranteed to be the time limited weapon. This is huge because if you pull a 5-star on the weapon banner, you are going to get the weapon you choose. This also applies to the permanent weapon banner, which I think is actually more worth to pull on than the standard character banner. There is also a beginner banner that gives a 5-star standard character at 50 pulls, but it is discounted at 8 pulls. After the beginner banner, there is a standard banner selector where you get to choose what 5-star standard character you want. After 80 pulls, you will get it for certain. You could also just roll early. You can change the character whenever you want, the pity will be kept. Personally, I think that Wuwa does a better job at gacha than Genshin simply because I actually have a reason to pull on the weapon banner more frequently. That guarantee is very important. I'll give 3 answers: the cop-out, the real one, and the hot take. The cop-out answer is just play both games. They each have something the other doesn't, and since they're gacha games, you can beat dailies and use up stamina in like 15 to 20 minutes. This way, you don't have to choose and you can have the best of both worlds, especially since competition only benefits the consumer. My real answer is that Wuthering Waves is better. I said it. I think it's better. The combat is better and the story is about the same quality. Character design isn't that far behind Genshin anyway, and the environment is pretty beautiful. Just turn your brightness down if you don't agree. Gacha also seems better as well. I'll take 80 pulls and a guaranteed weapon banner any day. Every time I play Genshin, I am reminded that I am not playing Wuthering Waves, and when I play Wuthering Waves, I forget about Genshin. I'm not gonna stop playing Genshin either. I can play the superior game while playing the inferior one, and honestly, these things aren't mutually exclusive. Wuwa can be the better game, and you can still play both. But if I were to recommend only one game, it would be Wuthering Waves. As for my hot take, HSR is better than both.